Hi guys, welcome back to another Unity Touch tutorial. My name is Devin, and today we're going to be rebuilding the 3D aspect of our TouchLogic script. And we're actually, in our last tutorial, we separated out all of the 3D stuff, and we're actually going to create two new scripts for the purpose of our 3D TouchLogic stuff. So the way that we're going to write this script, it's going to work for 3D objects, that is, objects that have colliders on them, but with some really simple modifications to our code at the end. You can make this work for objects with 2D colliders if you're using the new like Box Collider 2D as opposed to Box Collider for your sprite-based games. And the only changes that you have to make is we're going to use physics and raycasting. So if you wanted to make this work for your 2D games, instead of saying raycast hit, which is what we're going to use for this tutorial, you would say raycast hit 2D and physics 2D instead of just regular physics. So it'll be really easy to translate to work with your 2D games, just in case you're wondering about that. Alright, so the reason why we separated out our 3D, or why we're going to separate our 3D touches from our GUI touches, which is what TouchLogic handles now. It only handles GUI textures. The reason why we did that is because we don't need every single 3D object in the scene to cast a ray from the camera and see if it hit me. No, instead what we're going to do is we're going to just cast one ray from the camera, and we're going to make that ray check to see what it hit. And then we're going to say, alright, let's check what you hit. If you hit an object that is touchable, then call a touch function on it. And if it's not touchable, then don't do anything. And we're going to handle that through the use of interfaces. And yeah, I'm not going to go into deep detail about interfaces, but we're just going to use an interface as kind of like a template, as like a layout that just lists all the possible functions that are going to be in our interface. And generally the convention is to start the interface, or interfaces, with an I, so I'm going to call this one touchable 3D. And we're just going to use this as a layout for all of the functions that we're going to want to call on our touchable objects. So for an interface, we don't need that. Don't need to inherit from anything, and we're not going to use those. So we don't actually have any logic in an interface, or in our interface. We're just gonna. Hello. Okay, there we go. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab all of these functions that we created in our last tutorial, or, you know, these are our touch functions that we're going to use. I'll just paste them all in here, and get rid of that. And all of these things, we don't need those for our interface, so I'm going to hit Control F, bring this thing down and replace it with a semicolon, and hit the all button so it replaces all of them. And also you don't need public or virtual for our interface, so we're going to get rid of that. The way I'm doing this box select, in case you're wondering, is by holding Control and Alt and then dragging. You can delete all those at once. And that's it. That's what our interface is going to look like. But be sure to remove functions you know that you aren't going to use. So I'm probably not going to use that one or that one, so I'm just going to comment those out. Alright, so now that we have the I can close my TouchLogicV2, don't need to reference that anymore. So now that we have our interface laid out, let me show you how we're actually going to implement it. So I'm just going to create a new C# script, and this is just for the purposes of testing, so I'll call it a test 3D touchable. going to drag it onto my cube and not my sphere. The reason I'm going to do that is I'm going to show you that we're going to be able to check to see if a touchable script is on that object, and if it's not, like it's not on the sphere, then it's not going to do anything. But it will do stuff for our box. Alright, so the way that you implement an interface in your scripts is kind of like inheriting, except you do a comma, and then you could type in Touchable3D. And this is nifty, so like if you wanted your 3D object, so like say you have a 3D goblin, or you have a goblin character, and it's supposed to inherit from another class you created called enemy. You can inherit from enemy, but you can also implement an interface, iTouchable. Yes, that's nifty, so, you know, have more functionality and stuff. Alright, so I'm going to right-click on my interface that I just typed out, and go to Refactor, Implement Interface, and then hit Enter, and that will automatically fill out all of the functions that we've defined in our interface. Yeah, and if we don't have, like if we remove one of these functions, it's going to throw an error. So that's why if you don't want to use any of the functions, just be sure to remove them from your interface. And then it also fills in it automatically fills in this little bit of logic here, or this little function here, that pretty much just says, hey, you didn't implement this function yet, so it's going to throw an error. Let's go ahead and create our TouchLogic3D. So TouchLogic3D. And this I'm going to go ahead and throw on the camera. There we go. And it could go on any object in the scene, just make sure that there's only one of them, or else if you have this script on multiple objects, then it's going to be casting multiple rays and calling that function multiple times on whatever object it hits. So just be sure that there's only one of those in your scene. Right. So let's open up TouchLogic3D and start writing some 3D TouchLogic. Alright. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to our old TouchLogic where we still had the 3D stuff implemented. And I'll just copy that over real quick. I'm going to close these for now. That was in the void update function. Start, I don't think we had anything. We do need these. Let's see. Screen point array. We need our loop, our for loop. And tab all those over. Close that off. Let's see if that gives us any errors. Still compiling. Alright, we got no errors. Awesome. Alright, so now this is just exactly what we had in our old TouchLogic, including our 2D stuff, this OnTouchAnywhere. We just want to keep these things, except we're not going to use SendMessage anymore. We're going to do something a little bit more fancy and efficient. But I'm just going to go ahead and remove these real quick. Alright, and now we're going to remove all of these and just place one at the very top, since what these are doing is they're checking to see what the raycast actually hit, we're just gonna call that once up here, and then after we've determined that it has hit something, then we're gonna check to see what state the touch is in. Come on. Yeah. Okay, I can close that. Let's open up our test touchable. So we've got these untouched, ended anywhere, moved anywhere, stayed anywhere, untouched began, ended, moved. Let's go ahead and add, actually, hang on. So if you want to add things, you have to delete all of that, go back to your interface and add in whatever you want to add. So I'm going to add in untouched stayed, since we didn't have that for some reason. And I'm going to refactor, implement interface, enter. Right. Okay, so right now, just for the purposes of testing, let's remove these 3Ds. We're eventually going to remove the SendMessage and just call it regularly, but let's just see if this works. So if I hit this, we should get some, yeah, we get these not implemented exception errors. If I click on the sphere, we get no receiver, and that's because it's sending a message to the ball, but there is no function. And the square gets the not implemented exceptions because it actually does have that function, but it's just not being implemented. We don't have any logic inside of it, except for the code that tells it to run this error. Alright, so that works, and we are sending messages still. We don't want to do that. Instead, what we want to do is we want to check to see if the thing that we touched implements this iTouchable3D. And I'm going to go ahead and make a private variable of type iTouchable3D. And we'll call it touched object, and it's going to equal null. Right, so in here we're looping through all the touches that are on the screen, setting current touch to I, creating a ray from the touch position, and we're going to use that ray to see if the ray hit something. And then before we get into all of this stuff, we also want to check to see if the thing that it hit is if it implements iTouchable. So all of this is going to be inside of that if statement. I'm going to see if the thing that was hit implements iTouchable3D. Yeah. And the way that we do that is we're going to get our touched object, which is of type iTouchable, and we're going to set it equal to hit ray info dot transform get component, and we're going to get a component that is a type of iTouchable3D, and then we're just going to say as iTouchable3D just to be safe. Make sure that it knows that it's an iTouchable3D object. And let's go ahead and debug.log touched object. I'm just gonna set that to true for now. We'll change that later, but I just want to see if this thing can recognize what the touched object is when we touch it. So, if I hit play, and if I hit the cube, you can see down here it says cube test 3D touchable. And if I hit the sphere, you can see it says null. So that's perfect. That says that it recognizes that the cube is of type iTouchable, and not only, or iTouchable 3D, and not only that, but it found the actual class that implements it, which is the test 3D touchable. So now that we know that we have that component, now that we have the test 3D touchable component, we can directly call the onTouchBegan functions or whatever. So if I go back here, I could remove that. We've already used our rayHitInfo up here to get the component, which we need the component, we don't need the game object itself, so I can just delete that and directly say touched object, which we have stored in our variable, dot onTouchBegan. So we directly call the onTouchBegan function on our touched object that we found on the raycast. And up here in this if statement, instead of just saying true, which means it'll just always fire, we want to say, alright, if the touched object is not equal to null. So, as you remember, if we touched the sphere, it returned null. So what this means is, since the sphere, which does not have an iTouchable 3D script implemented on it, since it doesn't have that, it's going to be equal to null, so this logic will not run and the functions will not try to be called on that. But this one does, so this will be true, and then we will call functions on it. So we can just directly call functions on it now without having to send messages. Perfect. Alright, so now if we go ahead, go into here and just do a simple debug.log I was touched. Yeah, and then, you know, you'd want to write in some other things to not get those errors, and I'm just going to go ahead and comment them out for now so they don't clutter our console. Oops, gotta close that. And we have an error. Alright, what is our error? rayH touched object. rayH touched object, get rid of that. Now it should work. So now if we touch on our sphere, we still get null because we're still checking, we're still have that debug line in there, but we're not getting any errors saying that we can't send message to it because we're not sending a message anymore. And then the cube, we see that it grabs the cube, it grabs its test3D touchable component, and then it calls its onTouchBegan function, which is just that simple debug line, I was touched. Yeah, and then we don't get errors anywhere else because we commented those out. So this is just a more efficient way to call functions on 3D objects. Alright, so we're pretty much done now. If you just want to be able to touch on your object and that's it, that's fine, we're done. You could stop listening to this video now. But if you want to be able to call the anywhere functions, the onTouchAnywhere, we're going to do a little bit more. We're going to do some more fancy stuff to it. And the fancy stuff that we're going to do to it is really not that fancy. We're just going to copy all of this, and outside of this physics raycast function, or yeah, Outside of this if statement, we're going to say else, and then just paste that in. So we're essentially taking this whole block and setting it outside of our hit test. So this will happen on anywhere. And this will happen only if it hits something. Alright, so the first time this thing goes through, it's going to say, oh hey, you hit something. What did you hit? Oh, well I hit a touchable object. And then it's going to call whatever function that we want it to on that touchable object. Now the next frame, it's going to say, oh, well, we didn't hit anything, but we still have this touched object filled in with whatever we had last frame. Alright, well, it didn't hit anything. We didn't hit anything this frame. Let's go down. Alright, well, touched object is not empty, so let's call the anywhere functions on it. And then the only thing that we want to do down here is onTouchEnded anywhere. Let me fill these in real quick. OnTouchEnded anywhere, then we want to set touched object back to null, or else it's going to keep calling the anywhere functions all the time on that object that we hit. Yeah. So let's give onTouchMovedAnywhere a debug. Debug.log onMovedAnywhere. Alright, onTouchBeganAnywhere, no extension method. Right, that's because in our iTouchable3D we removed the onTouchBeganAnywhere, so we cannot call that function. All I have to do is remove that case, and that should work. What is up with the... Yeah, something really weird is going on with my mono behavior. It keeps doing weird stuff sometimes. Alright, well, let's play it. So now, if I touch on my cube, I get the I was touched because onTouchBegan. And then if I move my finger still on the cube, so it's not calling the onTouchMovedAnywhere function until we start getting off the cube, in which case it calls the onTouchMovedAnywhere function. And if I let go and then start moving again, it doesn't keep calling this MovedAnywhere function. It's like just, you know. Yeah, and then if I touch and then I touch somewhere else with a different finger, it does call the onTouchMovedAnywhere, which we do not want to happen. We want it to watch a certain touch. We want it to watch our touch to watch. And we don't have our touch to watch variable out here, so let's go ahead and do that. Public, actually, let's make it private. Private int touch to watch, and set it equal to 64, or just something crazy, because you can't have 64 fingers on your screen at once. Yeah. On our onTouchBegan, we're going to set touch to watch equal to current touch, or I, because they're the same thing. And then here we're going to check to see if touched object is not null, and our touch to watch equals our current touch, or I, either one, then play that. Come on, mono behavior. Stop doing weird stuff. So now if I touch my cube, and and I touch somewhere else and start moving anywhere with my other finger, it's not going to recognize that one until I start moving off with that initial finger. Then it starts calling our onTouchMovedAnywhere. And then if I clear that, let's see if I touch again and start moving. Yeah, it doesn't call it until we start our touch on our object and then move somewhere else. So perfect, that's it. We are done. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if this is helpful. And don't forget, you can always download this code and view the related videos on my website, devination.com. And I just opened up a new Google Plus community, so anyone who wants to join, you could just, there'll be a link in the description below this video. You could join the community and ask questions, help people, or just show off something cool that you made in Unity. Yeah, so thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.